A group of lesbians hunting down a monster? Say less. Sounds like it'd be right up my alley, right? Right? Yeah. Unfortunately, Veal by Mackenzie Nolan missed the mark for me. But before I get to that, my name is Frank. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things bookish. So before I dive into my critiques of this novel, let me just take this opportunity to let you know where I do think that this book actually shined and who I think would really benefit from reading this. So one of the major strengths of this book was the fact that it was able to maintain a sense of suspense and intrigue for the reader from start to finish. You weren't sure if the monster was real or not. And if it was real, you were trying to figure out the entire book, who made it, what it actually was, where it came from, and all of that. So the suspense was maintained throughout the novel. There was a very tangible sense of curiosity, but unfortunately, once this curiosity was quenched, it left me greatly disappointed. But I will get to that in a second. I do think a young adult audience could benefit from this novel. When I say young adult, I'm not talking about the publishing world version of young adult, which is, I think, 14 to 20 years old or something. I'm talking about actual young adults, 18 to 23-year-olds who are just now being introduced to the concepts of feminism, patriarchy, their queerness, and what it means to be alienated by these systems, but also have to live within them. So anyone who is just trying to explore these themes and is just now being introduced to that kind of thing would probably benefit a bit more from this book than I did. So that is the spoiler-free portion of this video. If you have not read this book yet and you plan to, this is probably where you're going to want to exit out. With all of that being said, as a queer adult novel, which is exactly what this is, what it has been marketed as, this did not work for me. Now, I knew it was probably not going to be good when I started having issues with our main character in chapter 1. Okay, Dolores Lawrence Franklin is her name. In the first couple of chapters, we learn that Lawrence and her best friend Stasia have just up and left their hometown and moved to a small island called Mistaken Point. Now, Lawrence was a high-rolling corporate something or other. It's never actually specified what she did. She was just a big shot in the corporate world. And unfortunately, she could not hack it in this corporate world. She struggled greatly with her mental health, which is totally relatable. I get it, girl. So because of this, she and her friend Stasia decided to enroll in graduate programs at Mistaken Point University. Now, even from the beginning of the book, their friendship was very confusing to me. They've been friends, best friends since they were children. They were each other's first kiss. And despite all of this history being explained to the reader, I did not understand why they were friends at all. If anything, this seemed like almost like a forced proximity thing, but like friendship wise. They were both lesbians in their hometowns and they both came from strict religious backgrounds. So that was understandable. But outside of that, they have literally nothing else in common. They are completely different people, very, very different. And they're always bickering. They're always arguing with each other. They're always doing this like back and forth nonsense. And it is presented to the reader as like a funny, cutesy little thing, but I found it very confusing and irritating, to be honest with you. Here's an example. As soon as they moved into their new apartment in Mistaken Point, Lawrence / Dolores, right? But we're going to call her Lawrence for the rest of this video because that's how she is referred to in the book. So Lawrence is asking Stasia, she's like, oh my God, do you hate me? Are you mad at me? Do you resent me for dragging you all the way out here and moving you out here? And Stasia is like, girl, we literally just moved in here 5 hours ago. Can you give me a minute to just give me some time to actually experience living here and I'll let you know. And Lawrence is like, oh, okay. And then there's like a 2-minute break of silence. And Lawrence is like, okay, what about now? Do you still hate me? And of course, they both kind of chuckle at this. They're both laughing and hee-hawing about it. And I'm like, I didn't think that was funny. I thought that was really annoying and very clingy. I wasn't vibing with that. I didn't find it cute. I didn't find it friendly. If somebody was acting like that, that shit would grate my nerves. I would be very annoyed if I told somebody to give me some space and they were like, "Okay, what about now?" No, get away from me. Anyway, I'm not Stasia though, so she apparently didn't care. Honestly, I was trying because we're in the first couple of chapters, y'all. This is like chapter 2 or 3. So I'm nervous. I'm like, oh my God, I already find the main character annoying. That's not a good sign. But I was trying to stay optimistic. Unfortunately, this feeling of annoyance that I had for Lawrence was really only solidified through the expression of her love interest, whose name, you ready for this? Whose name is Francesca Frankie Dolores. Did you get that? Her name is Frankie Dolores, and our main character's name is Dolores Franklin. Are you confused? Yeah, so was I. I was like, what? Her love interest literally has her name in reverse. I don't know if that was supposed to be some lesbian trope thing where if you are in the sapphic community at all, there is a joke, there's like an ongoing stereotype kind of thing where you fall in love with yourself, you fall in love with people who look like you. It's like a siblings or dating situation a lot of the time where you date people who look like you subconsciously. So I was like, is this some kind of joke on that where they're dating people who have literally the same name as them, but like flippy floppied? Anyway, whatever. Not a fan. I was hoping that it was going to amount to something, that there was going to be some maybe supernatural reason as to why this was. No. Nope. No, it was never addressed. The only time it was addressed is towards the end of the book where Lawrence is having this internal monologue in her mind and she's like, Frankie is my mirror. She's my inverse. She's my opposite. That's it. That's about the amount of explanation that we get. How do you feel about that? If you've read this book, did you like that? Did you think it was funny? I don't know. I didn't enjoy that at all. I did not think it was a clever development, but I don't know. You let me know. Did you find it irritating or did you think it was fun? And to make matters worse, turns out that there was a serial killer on the loose in Mistaken Point prior to the women moving there. Okay. He was caught. He was already put in jail by the time they actually moved there, but he was murdering young women about their age, 18 to 25. And he was chopping up their bodies and leaving them all throughout the town. So he gets caught. Turns out the man's name was Franklin Dolores. Yep. It was Frankie's dad. We don't learn that until later on in the book, but I'm telling you now. So Frankie was named after her dad, Franklin Dolores. Her name is Francesca Dolores. Yes. So there are 3 characters in this book that basically have the same name for no reason. Now, in terms of Frankie being named after her dad, it kind of made sense. I'm sure it was kind of done on purpose to just solidify one of the main points that the author was trying to make throughout the book, which is that women often carry the trauma and the violence of men. But truthfully, the fact that there were 3 characters that had the same name in this book genuinely pissed me off. Whatever. I'm moving past this point. So during her first week in Mistaken Point, Lawrence kind of thinks to herself, she's like, hey, I'm a grad student. I need money. I should probably look for a job. And as she's thinking this to herself, a flyer for a local arcade just gets blown up by the wind and lands under her foot. And she picks it up. She's like, oh man, this arcade is hiring. Oh, gee whiz. And I hated this. I hated this so much. I really did. Talk about an unnecessary coincidence, am I right? Was there no other way for our character to come across this flyer? I mean, she's literally a university student. Couldn't you have had her walk into some administration hall or a student hall that has a bulletin board of like job postings? And she could have just seen that one and picked that off the board. And like, would that not have been a much better way for her to come across this job posting? It's like, oh no, just as she's thinking that she needs to get a job, this flyer just magically flies into her fucking face. Oh my god.
Coincidence? I think not!
Didn't like it. I did not like it, but hey, who gives a shit, right? Not the author, apparently. I'm gonna get into the plot holes in a second. Just wait. But you think that's the worst one? Not even close. Holy crap. Anyway, so Lawrence gets to the arcade, and boom, there's Frankie, the owner of this arcade. She inherited it from her father. Again, I think that was meant to be commentary about women inheriting the trauma and the violence of men. Again, this is a theme that we get throughout the book, and I'll talk about that as well. Anyway, so Lawrence is asking Frankie about the job posting, and Frankie is apparently super hot, like super hot. And Lawrence cannot stop thinking about how hot this girl is. So the two women exchange names. Lawrence walks in and she's like, oh, I'm looking for the job. And Frankie's like, oh, okay, yeah, man. Well, what's your name? And Lawrence is like, oh, my name is Dolores Franklin. And Frankie's like, oh, that's funny. My name is Frankie Dolores. And that is the only acknowledgement in the entire book that we get, because Lawrence is like, oh, haha, what are the chances? What a coincidence. Yeah, exactly. The fuck?
Coincidence? I think not!
That is the only acknowledgement we get about how absurd it is that they have the exact same name in reverse. So Lawrence is asking about the job, and Frankie is showing her around the arcade. And there is some really corny flirting going on. I'm talking about Lawrence is shooting her shot, and she's getting shot down again and again. She's just ignoring her. Lawrence is shooting a shot and she's making a flirtatious move or says a flirtatious comment, and Frankie just doesn't even acknowledge it. It doesn't stop Lawrence. She keeps on going. So at some point, this is the end of their interview or impromptu interview or whatever, and Frankie is like playing around with this necklace, this gold chain that has a claw on it. And she's playing with it and she puts it in her mouth. She's chewing on it. And Lawrence just reaches out her hand and pulls it out of her mouth. Where'd you get this? What does it mean? Excuse the fuck out of me? Who are you? Why are you touching her? Who are you to just reach your hand out and touch this woman? You're gonna pull that out of her mouth? Are you serious? After you've been shooting your shot, she's made it clear she's not interested right now, and you're gonna just grab something out of her mouth like that? But somehow she gets the job. Frankie doesn't seem to care, just gives her the job, and is like, okay, you can start on this day. I wasn't a fan of this at all. I did not like that. Like I said, I was pretty annoyed with how pushy Lawrence was in the beginning with her friend Stasia and that whole conversation. And like I said, throughout the book, that feeling really was only cemented by how pushy Lawrence is when it comes to Frankie. It is disturbing, actually. And I thought that it was going to be like, I was like, oh, wait, hold on. Maybe this is going to be some like obsessive stalker situation and Lawrence is actually going to be a bad guy. No, she's just a fucking clingy weirdo. Oh my God. Anyway, so there's this other thing that happens where Lawrence shows up for her first day of work. And she is walking through the door and she sees Frankie and she's like, oh, hey, good morning. How are you? And Lawrence is like, hey, what's up with all of that weird smoke that was going on outside? I tried to ask a few people on the street, like a few locals on the street, but they just ignored me. They just totally shunned me. So like, do you know what that's about? And then Frankie completely ignores her. Completely ignores the question.
What the hell was that?
Lawrence is like, hey, what's that about? Why is everyone ignoring me? And then Frankie just ignores her, does not even acknowledge her existence. And you're like, what? That's so fucking weird. So naturally, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what the heck is that about? So I'm thinking, oh, there's got to be a reason for this, right? There's going to be some kind of purpose to this, to these people completely ignoring her. Maybe she's a ghost. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe there's a plot twist that I'm not seeing. No, dude, they were all just dickheads. There is no reason, though. It's chalked up to they're just iffy about outsiders, right? But it's like, look, I live in a small town, all right? I know that locals are wary of outsiders sometimes, but they're not gonna just flat out ignore you to your face if you're speaking directly to them. They're at least going to acknowledge your existence and answer a simple question. Maybe they'll say, I don't know what the smoke is about, I don't know. But they're not going to just look at you like you're a freaking alien and not speak to you at all. This was such a weird encounter to include, in my opinion, because it was nothing. It meant nothing. I guess it was supposed to highlight how weary the locals in this town are of outsiders. But again, even so, if somebody is talking to you, they're not just going to ignore. Anyway, it was weird. Didn't like it. By the end of chapter 4, the author goes ahead and does this really awesome thing where she foreshadows, basically gives the whole book away in one moment. She completely just gives it all away at the end of chapter 4 because Lawrence is in her bedroom and she is watching the lighthouse light just like circle around, and she compares, the light to a yellow eye. She then, for some unknown reason, literally of her own volition, for no reason at all, just finds a sticky note piece of paper and writes a note down that says, everything looks like something else if you believe it does. And then she just sticks it up on her wall. And you're like, what the hell is that about? And that's the twist, people. That's the twist. There is no monster. All 4 girls throughout this entire book are having a shared delusion where they think a monster is real and they're hunting it down and they're doing research and doing all this stuff, and it's literally just a shared delusion. That's it. That's the major reveal at the end. Crazy twist, right? But hey, maybe I'm alone in that. The suspense was there. I did want to know if it was real or not, but the reveal just pissed me off. So what did you think about it? If you read this book, did you see it coming? Did you enjoy this twist? What did you think about the archaeologists at the end finding this long lost footage of these 4 women just in the parking lot of the arcade, just stabbing at air, stabbing at nothing, and then they proceed to set the entire town on fire? That's how the book ends. That is the epilogue. I don't know. Tell me what you thought, because drop a comment. Tell me what you thought. So in chapter 5, we meet Pippa, who is actually Frankie's lifelong best friend. So we have Stasia and Lawrence, and then we have Frankie and Pippa, right? This is the group that ends up monster hunting. And they're all lesbians. So early on in chapter 5, when we do meet Pippa, all 3 of them, so it's Lawrence, Frankie, Pippa, they're all hanging out in the arcade where they all work, and they're all joking around. And Frankie makes your mom joke.
Mom?
My mother's coming.
That's what she said.
Did not like that. So far in this book, Pippa is really the only likable character for me. Stasia is a self-hating gay. Yep. Which I guess, when you consider her strict Catholic upbringing, that does make sense. But I have never met a lesbian in real life who is so male-centered and genuinely hates women the way that Stasia does. That's not to say that they don't exist, or that it was just completely unrealistic, or that it was hard to fathom how she kind of came to these conclusions where she was validating men's opinions and men's desires and all this other stuff and was constantly putting other women down. Because it is true that there are a lot of people that do have, even if you're gay or queer in any capacity, internalized homophobia is still a thing, internalized misogyny is still a thing. It's just that I didn't much care for it. I didn't particularly enjoy this aspect of Stasia's character. I will say that throughout the book, her character did grow on me. She was complex and she was holding on to a lot of trauma, as is every single one of these other women, right? She wasn't alone in that aspect of her character. But I did find that as the book progressed, I did have more compassion for Stasia, especially because she did have some character growth. But yeah, in the beginning, I wasn't with the shit. Lawrence was annoying from start to finish. If anything, she got more annoying as the book progressed. Now, she had her own trauma with her relationship with her mother. Her mother was a very controlling woman. Lawrence could never live up to her mother's expectations of her. But even so, I just found Lawrence to be very clingy and very obsessive, especially when it came to Frankie. And that obsession was never justified for her character. It never made any sense. The whole time I was like, who are you talking about? Who are you talking to? Literally, it was from the very moment that they met, Lawrence was weirdly obsessed. The worst part about it was there was no character growth, there was no development, there was no point where she realized that her weird obsession with Frankie was like maybe a bit unsettling. No. If anything, she was actually rewarded for her incessant persistence when it came to Frankie because they end up together at the end of the book. For literally half of the book, Lawrence was having this weird internal monologue where she was talking about how badly she wanted to consume Frankie and eat her and lick her from top to bottom, and not in a sexy fun way, but in a literal like consume her, eat her flesh type of way.
I like it with the skin, D. I'm not allowed to eat it with the skin. I'm not allowed.
And she was like, I would turn myself into a monster if it would get Frankie to pay attention to me. And that was her character for almost the entire book. So yeah, Lawrence didn't care for her. Pippa was chill the whole time. I loved Pippa. I have no notes on her character, to be honest with you. I liked her, and I felt like she was the only one out of the four of them that was even attempting to process her trauma and her issues in a relatively healthy way. And maybe that's why she was really the only one who didn't believe in the monster up until the very end of the book, but I don't know. And then, of course, we have Frankie. Frankie was just having a rough time, dude. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I can't even fault that chick for the craziness that was her life, because I really can't imagine what it would be like to spend your entire life being physically abused by your father only to find out that he was a serial killer and he enjoyed chopping up women who were your age. All your friends, people you dated. This dude was sick. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, on the night of his arrest, he literally chopped off Frankie's arm. I'll get more into that in a second, but I was like, what? Disturbing. So to say that this poor woman was traumatized would be an understatement, truly. So I think that's part of why Lawrence's obsession for Frankie was so irritating to me, because it had only been a few months since Frankie's dad, had been arrested. So it wasn't like years had passed and Frankie had time to recover from this extremely traumatic event in her life. She was like fresh out of this, okay? And Lawrence's obsession and her desperation for Frankie's attention was really disturbing, and not in a fun, oh, that's so romantic way, but in a, will you leave this woman alone, please, kind of way. And the part that kind of annoyed me was that the author tried to portray it as Lawrence being this compassionate and understanding character for Frankie, and how she's like the only one that ever believed her and all this stuff. And that's ultimately what gets Frankie to actually fall in love with Lawrence, reciprocate that. But Lawrence's obsessive ulterior motives completely shattered that illusion for me. I did not feel like their connection was genuine. I did not feel like it was coming from a place of true love and admiration for Frankie. Like I said, Lawrence was obsessed with her from day one, talking about how in love with her she was in her mind and all this other stuff. And mind you, yes, they worked together, but Frankie was not giving Lawrence the time of day. In the span of like 3 weeks, I think they exchanged a total of like 10 words with each other. It was weird. It grossed me out, to be honest with you. Now, the majority of this book was just our four main characters having very overt and explicit conversations about feminism, about patriarchy, and about, not fitting in. One of the most prominent examples of this is when Stasia, who was on a softball team, on an adult softball team, doesn't get invited to a party because she is a lesbian and she doesn't have a boyfriend to bring with her. Now, forgive me, I don't know what softball is like in this imaginary universe where these characters live, but in the real world, softball is the second most lesbian sport that exists, right behind soccer, okay? Literally one of the most lesbian sports ever. Not to make generalizations here, I'm not trying to stereotype or nothing, but I I was hard pressed to believe that softball players would exclude a lesbian from a party because she's a lesbian. And I found it even harder to believe that Stasia was the only lesbian on the team. I mean, it never gets mentioned whether or not she is, but if she's the only one that got excluded because she's gay, then I think that's a fair assumption to make, right? Anyway, I was like, okay, honestly, whatever. So, of course, this rejection launches this whole conversation between our characters about the fact that they're not able to perform womanhood correctly because they're not male-centered, despite the fact that Stasia is literally male-centered for the entire time up until this point in the book. So I don't know what the fuck point they were trying to make with that, but it was incorrect. My issue with these conversations, because this isn't the only one that happens, this is, like I said, just the most prominent example. And the issue was that there was absolutely no subtlety at all. Every time these conversations happened in the book, they were very overt and they occurred inorganically. The characters were speaking as if they were all performing a play instead of just having a conversation with one another. And it felt like the author was trying to speak directly to the reader through the characters instead of having the characters speaking to each other. It felt very unnatural. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but that's how I felt. And this is part of why in the beginning of this video, I said that a young adult audience would probably be the ones to benefit from this book, because the author was trying to explicitly explain these concepts to the audience. Because I'm sorry to say, it felt like she thought we were stupid and that we were too dumb to get the point. It was like she just didn't trust that we were going to be able to pick up on the themes of this book by ourselves, so she just had to lay it all out for us. And it's like, don't think the name of the island, Mistaken Point, went over my head. I got the point, girl. There was no mistaking it. Haha, but anyway. So let's get into the plot holes of this book, because there were many. Working off of the last moment in the book that I was just talking about, after the four women make Stasia feel better about her softball team's rejection of her, Pippa drives Stasia home, leaving Lawrence back at Frankie's house, and Lawrence stays behind so that she can help Frankie clean up. And they have this intimate moment where Lawrence is like, hey, want to go take a ride on my brand new motorcycle that she had just bought from a character named Bobby, who was an elder gay in this town. And she's also a family friend of Frankie's. She was friends with Franklin, Frankie's dad. One of the things I thought was funny was how in this book, the only characters that Lawrence basically interacts with are other lesbians. And when she does interact with non-lesbian characters, she basically thinks that these women are all stupid because they are male-centered, despite the fact that Stasia, her best friend, is literally male-centered anyway. But of course, she thinks to herself, she can't blame them, these poor male-centered dumb women. She used to be the same way too. She used to also hold all of this internalized misogyny before she became super smart and super evolved. Oh, these poor, stupid, male-centered women. That's basically the sentiment that I was getting anytime she interacted with non-lesbian folk in this book. Believe it or not, that's actually not the plot hole that I was talking about. The plot hole is that Frankie declines Lawrence's invitation to go on a motorcycle ride, and instead Frankie is like, hey, I actually want to show you something. So Frankie takes Lawrence to her backyard and shows her this swing set that her dad had built for her when she was a kid. And she's talking about her childhood a little bit. And when they're done with this moment, they walk back to Frankie's house. And guess what happens when Lawrence leaves? Go ahead, leave it in the comments. If you haven't read the book yet, go ahead and guess what happens. Did you write it? Okay. She walks all of the way home. Weren't we literally just talking about her brand new motorcycle like 2 pages ago? You just left your bike there and walked all the way home? You just totally forgot it, eh? Okay. Now you might be saying, well, Frank, maybe there was actually a point to this, okay? Maybe the author did this on purpose, wanted to give Lawrence an excuse to go back and talk to Frankie after they just shared this moment the next day or something. Nope. No, she just totally forgot it. She just totally forgot about it. I think the author literally totally forgot that she had a motorcycle. And you're asking how I know this? It's because Lawrence doesn't talk to Frankie for an entire week after this moment. She has midterms, so she's busy. She doesn't have a chance to respond to the group chat. She doesn't have a chance to go over to Frankie's. She literally just left her motorcycle there and doesn't talk to Frankie for a whole week. So what? She doesn't interact with her for a whole week. So how'd she get her motorcycle back? Was she just walking back and forth? She just totally left it there. Anyway, this was such an easily avoidable plot hole, and yet we blew a metaphorical tire because what the hell? Now, another absolutely absurd moment is chapter 18 titled Cursed. This is after they've made up. They had a huge fight and they've made up. Frankie comes to pick Lawrence up from her university. Why? I can't remember. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And hey, she's literally in the middle of a high-speed cop chase. Yes, you heard that right. She is literally in the middle of being chased by two police vehicles.
Mother of God.
Let's go, 91.
Where did that come from? How did that happen? That's a good question. The answer that Frankie gives is that it's because she called them stupid and incompetent. So they are blowing through town trying to evade these cops. And what do you know? They succeed. They actually manage to shake them and get away. So where do you think they go after this? Where do you think they just escaped the police that were chasing them in this high-speed car chase? Where did they go? They go back to Frankie's house. And then we literally never hear about it ever again. There is no follow-up. There is no mention of it. The cops don't go to her house to find her. They don't, nothing. Now there is the possibility that because all of these girls are having shared delusions, legitimately they are seeing things that are not there, the monster, it is possible that this high-speed car chase wasn't even real, that it was completely fabricated and imaginary event. But if it wasn't real, there was no point in putting it there. There was nothing that came from this. There was nothing that was built off of this. This wasn't a moment that these two women shared that strengthened their bond or anything like that. It just didn't serve a purpose. So my other thing is that even if it was real, it didn't serve a purpose. So whether it was real or fake, there was anyway, there's just no reason to put it in the book. All right, so we're going to fast forward a bit, and now we have made it to Cowboy Night, which is a cowboy-themed event that the arcade is hosting. They do this pretty much around holidays and stuff like that. They throw these parties and whatnot. And Pippa, Lawrence, and Frankie, which remember they all work at this arcade, are getting all of the preparations for the event ready. And now Frankie says something. She's very frustrated. She's very stressed out. And she says something along the lines of, oh man, I'm having a really hard time getting in touch with the disco ball rental company. Two questions. Why wouldn't you just buy disco balls? Anyway, that's not even the important question. The important question is, why would you have disco balls at a cowboy-themed theme night?
Ah, nation, you look as pretty as Peach. Yes, you do.
Did cowboys love to just disco it up and I was not aware of this? Were there no theme appropriate decorations that the author could have substituted for a disco ball to actually make sense for this theme? I don't know. I just thought it was really stupid, but whatever, because that's not even the real plot hole. The real plot hole is that at some point during this theme night, Pippa is talking to Lawrence, and she is explaining that on the last theme night, which was the Valentine's Day theme night, that was the night that Franklin got arrested, and it was also the night that he had gone down to the basement with Frankie and chopped her hand off. So, of course, Stasia shows up, and Lawrence and Stasia are like, oh my God, we got to go down to the basement. We got to figure it out. And Pippa's like, oh my God, you girls are crazy. And Lawrence is like, you're on lookout duty, all right? And Pippa's like, all right, fine. You can make a break for it. If you go now, Frankie is distracted. I'll keep a lookout. Okay. So Stasia and Lawrence get down to the basement, and Pippa sends Lawrence a text, and she's like, hey, how's it going? Like, are you guys okay? And Lawrence thinks to herself, she says, I'm gonna put my phone on do not disturb because I need to focus.
If you want a tip, you could have gotten a bag at the hamburger store.
I can't listen to this shit anymore.
You literally have Pippa on lookout. Why would you put your phone on do not disturb? Why would you not want your lookout to be able to communicate with you in case somebody is coming down to the basement? Specifically Frankie. And lo and behold, Frankie does come down to the basement. She meets them down there. They see the monster. They all three run up back into the, Frankie's office, which is where the door that leads to the basement is. They shut the door behind them. They're all huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing. Oh my God, that was a close one, right? And Pippa, this is the plot hole. Pippa walks into the office and is like, where did you guys all go? You guys left me to man the photo booth all by myself. Well, you guys know I hate working the photo booth. Where did you go? Girl, you know exactly where they went. You know exactly where they were. You knew exactly why you were asking such stupid questions. Are you stupid? And you're thinking to yourself, you're like, okay, maybe she just didn't want to blow their cover, even though she sees Frankie is there with them and they're all huffing and puffing and holding the door shut behind them. Maybe Pippa is trying to keep it casual, trying to keep it cool, calm, and collected, right? No, she was literally just genuinely confused. She literally just thought they all abandoned her to go fuck around and do whatever. I don't know. But in the book, she's genuinely confused as to where they went. Now, the last thing I want to mention is that the word hummed was used 29 times and the word humming was used 5 times. This book was less than 300 pages. So for a total of 34 times of some variation of the word hummed or humming, that means that at least once every less than 10 pages, there was a word like that being used. It was very noticeable and could have really benefited from an additional round of editing. But hey, this book is already fucking published, so that doesn't matter now, does it? How nobody caught that? Beyond me, man. I noticed it right at first. I was like, she hummed. Dude, it felt like it was every 2 minutes. She hummed, he hummed, they hummed, we hummed. God damn. In conclusion, there were actually some really solid moments in this book. I'm not going to sit here and say that the entire thing was garbage, all right? It's just all 4 of the main characters did not seem fully fleshed out. Most of the time, they were unlikable for me. And to be honest with you, they seemed like caricatures of lesbians. They seemed like exaggerated stereotypes of lesbians. I appreciated the core messaging of the book, but I think it could have been done a little bit more tactfully, in my opinion. The monster not being real and simply being a metaphor for the violence of men and internalized misogyny was rather disappointing. I'm not going to lie. I spent the whole book wondering if the monster was real or if it was just a metaphor for this stuff. And it was a disappointment to find that it wasn't real and that these women were literally all being delusional altogether, seeing things that were not there, coming up with things to the point where Frankie was constantly harassing people and calling the police and trying to make police reports and being very adamant that there was a monster, and they were laughing at her and crap. No, it was not real. And so it was disappointing, like I said, but it was understandable given the theme of heavy-handedness by the author. Was this the worst book ever? No, of course not. And for a debut, I do think that there were, like I said, a lot of really solid moments and a lot of potential there. I think it was a solid start for this author. But why don't you go ahead and you let me know what you thought of this book? Because it's possible that maybe I was just being way too harsh. I don't know. You let me know what you think. Until next time.